Well, when you, I also read in another interview of yours that you grew up in a house where, first of all, that both your parents were activists, so I guess it was sort of in your DNA to become an activist yourself, but also to become an intellectual, because you grew up in a house where Pakistani intellectuals, writers, journalists gathered in your garage, if I read correctly, right? So did you continue that tradition? Is your house today a place of encounter for...
Well, you know, I needn't have gone like that, because I could have rebelled totally and gone in an opposite direction. But I was never tempted by that, because I grew up in a very sort of old landed family. And the people who used to come to our home was one old conservative, reactionary members of this family, very sweet people, aunts and uncles, very nice to talk to about nothing. But then you had young poets, intellectuals, writers, short story writers, just the intelligentsia. I always found their company much more stimulating, even when I was very young, you know, from the age of about 7 or 8.
You were very lucky.
I was lucky.
Too.
I was very lucky. I remember the first poem I learned was a poem by Pushkin, to recite to all these people who were smiling and kissing my cheeks and, wonderful to hear you recite Pushkin. And so I was lucky. I was lucky. That certainly helped to make me what I am. And I've never regretted it. Never regretted it.
But you didn't continue that tradition with your home?
Well, I never actually force people to do anything. So I have 3 children. They're all progressive in different ways, not like I am, but they go on the peace marches, the demonstrations, or 2 of them do, and one is supportive and very hostile to war, but doesn't want to do the same thing as his sisters or his father or mother. So, but they grow up in our house and they see, but it's a different world again, you know, because these are all kids who've grown up in the post-communist world. And for them it's just a memory. And all they read about at school or college is the bad things about that world. But when you tell them there were some good things, and they say, like what? And I said, like, everyone had the right, good or bad, to housing, to health, to education. Women were taught to liberate themselves. Perhaps not in a good way, but they had that chance all over the former Soviet Union and Eastern Europe. And, we didn't know that. Yeah, really, they don't teach us that at school. I said, no, they don't, because that's a memory they want to obliterate.
I'm sure that you writing fiction was a surprise to everyone, or not? Did they expect you to write fiction?
You know something, when it was a surprise to me as well. And then one day, a few years ago, I went back to see my old mother in Lahore, in Pakistan. And she said, I've just found all the letters you wrote us when you were at Oxford to your father and me. And there's one quite interesting one. And it was a letter I had written to my mother in 1965 or 66, saying, you know something, I think I will write a novel one day. Not yet, I'm not ready for it, but one day I will. I had forgotten that I had written that, but I had. So clearly the idea was in my head. And so when radical left-wing politics was impossible, I didn't retreat from it, but I just moved sideways and started writing fiction.
And we are very happy that you did, but I was also shocked to read, because the Islam quintet, everybody's favorite or the most famous is Shadow of the Pomegranate Tree.
Yeah.
And I remember that you said in one interview that you didn't enjoy writing it at all, and you were surprised that it had success. So why didn't you enjoy, you know, as a fiction writer, I would like to know why you didn't enjoy
Well, I thought it was...
writing such a beautiful book.
No.
Such an important book.
What I meant was that it was a real struggle to write it. In that, it's not that I didn't like what I wrote. It was such a struggle because it was my first. The process was very difficult for me. And then it's a very sad story, which I was at the Sarajevo Book Fair 2 years ago, and the guy who was defense minister during the war said to me during the siege of Sarajevo, I read Shadows of the Pomegranate Tree 3 times just to stay alive. And he kissed my cheek. So I was very touched by that. And I think the novel went all over the world. It had a big impact. People read into it what they wanted to read into it.
They always do, don't they?
Yeah. A society under siege, women and children dying. The people in the Krajina could have also read it and seen themselves in it. Absolutely. So, but it was a difficult novel to write, and especially at the end when the child is killed brutally. That I hated writing because I had children that age myself. And many people said, how could you write it?
They say that to me too. Yes, but...
You have to do it.
You have to do it. You have to do it, and we get to love our characters, but there comes the point where they have to have their ending in the story.
Yeah, and as you know, you probably know that often when you're writing, a character emerges who you had not even thought of putting in the novel and almost runs away with the novel.
Yes.
And you have to hold him or her back and say, come on back.
But that's the beauty of writing, isn't it? When characters, they take their own life, have their own life, and they take their own path and surprise you.
Yeah.
That I think is the most beautiful thing. Let's finish this interview by going back to the beginning in a way, and going back to the left. When the IMG, the International Marxist Group, fell apart in Great Britain, you wrote a book, a satire, about the inability of the Trotskyists to deal with the fall of the Eastern Bloc. Now, you named it Redemption. I would like to know about that title. Why Redemption?
Because it's a religious word. And the critique in that novel was of small groups, not just Trotskyists, also Maoists, but essentially the mentality of a small political sect which operates, though it's not religious at all, in a religious way. It makes a secular religion of Marx or Lenin or Trotsky or Mao or any of these leaders, forgetting that they were human beings like us. They were very brilliant, they made mistakes, and so everything they wrote is not accurate. Many of the things they wrote didn't come true. That doesn't mean you throw them away, it means you just read everyone critically. And the failure to read them critically means that those who consider themselves the best interpreters become leaders of these sects and develop a cult around them. And that is what I was satirizing. But, now I feel a bit bad because I lost many friends. I don't regret writing it, but many people didn't speak to me after that, which is a casualty. But one of the things in that novel we end up with is that the Trotskyists of the world call a huge global convention where every single sect and faction of the Trotskyist movement is represented. And the big leader of the largest faction tells them, we have lost, communism has collapsed, and we were only a footnote to official communism. So we have to keep going. And this I wrote in 1990. And so I asked all our Jewish comrades to join the Jewish religion and become rabbis, Muslims to become Muslims and Ayatollahs, Christians to penetrate the Catholic and the Protestant and the Orthodox churches, and we will meet again in 20 years' time, and who knows, we might have more influence than we think. And an Egyptian friend of mine who read this novel, he said, Ya Allah, Tariq, what have you done? Didn't you know that all the Maoist leaders in Egypt are now in the Islamic Brotherhood? So I said, I didn't know that. He said, yes, and we were reading your novel and both laughing and crying because it's happening here.
Well, Mr. Ali, again, welcome to Montenegro. Thank you very much. It was an honor to have you here on Atlas Television. Thank you very much and enjoy your stay.
Thanks, a real pleasure talking to you.
Dragi gledalci, bio je to Tariq Ali. Gledali ste emisiju 100%. Vidimo se opet sutra večer u 20:30, a pratite Sajmsku hroniku večeras u 22:30. Prijatno.